This video is about factoring and solving a quadratic equation with an 1. First, we're going to review zero product property. So remember, in zero product property, each parenthesis with an x is going to get set equal to 0, and then we have to solve for x. So we have 2x minus 5 equals 0, and x minus 3 equals 0. In the first equation, we would add 5 to both sides, 2x equals 5, and then we would divide by 2, so x equals 5 over 2. We're going to leave it as a fraction. In the second one, we would add 3 to both sides, so x equals 3. So there were two parentheses, each with an x, which means we have two solutions. In number 2, we have 8x plus 2 equals 0, and x plus 5 equals 0. So in the first equation, we're going to subtract 2 from both sides. 8x is equal to negative 2. When we divide by 8, that's a fraction that can be reduced to negative 1/4. In the second equation, we subtract 5, so x equals negative 5. Factor the following. So remember, when we're factoring, we want to see what's going to multiply to the number on the end and add to the number next to x. So in number 3, we want to multiply to 16 and add to negative 10. So two numbers that multiply to 16 and add to negative 10. So some of us might be thinking 4 and 4, but if I make those negative, that's not going to add to negative 10. That's only going to add to negative 8. So two different numbers are 2 and 8, but they have to be negative. So we're going to have negative 2 and negative 8. Now, because there's not an equal sign, we don't have to solve. We're just writing our factor, and then we're moving on. Number 2, x squared plus 13x plus 42. So we want two numbers that multiply to 42 and add to 13. So two numbers that multiply to 42 are 6 and 7. So we have x plus 6 and x plus 7. Number 3, we want two numbers that multiply to negative 11 and add to negative 10. Because we are multiplying to a negative number, that means we're going to have one of each sign, one positive and one negative. Because we're adding to a negative, bigger number has to be the negative. So we would have negative 11 and 1. Those are the only numbers that multiply to negative 11. So we have x minus 11 and x plus 1. In number 4, we have x squared minus 25. There is no middle term there, so that means we are multiplying to negative 25 and we are adding to 0. So we want the same number with different signs. So we would have 5 and negative 5. So x plus 5 and x minus 5. In number 5, we want to multiply to positive 36 and add to negative 12. So we're looking for two positive numbers. So in this case, if I do 4 and I'm looking for two negative numbers. If I do 4 and 9, that would add to 13. If I made them both negative, that would be negative 13. But I'm looking for negative 12. So two other numbers are 6 and 6. We can make both of those negative. So we'd have x minus 6 times x minus 6. Remember, you can write that as x minus 6 squared if it's the same value in the parentheses. In number 6, we want to multiply to negative 63 and add to negative 2. So we want a positive and a negative number, and we want the bigger number to be negative. So we could have negative 9 and 7. So x minus 9 times x plus 7. In number 7, we want to multiply to 24 and add to negative 11. So two numbers that multiply to 24 are 3 and 8. And we can make those both negative to add to negative 11. So we have x minus 8 and x minus 3. In number 8, we have x squared plus 10x plus 24. So we want two numbers that multiply to 24 and add to 10. So we want two positive numbers. So those could be 6 and 4. So we would have x plus 6 and x plus 4. Remember, there's always only going to be one combination that works. In number 9, we want to multiply to negative 64 and add to 0 because there's no middle term. So we're looking for the same number. So if I have to, I can take the square root of 64 to find that number, which is going to be 8. So we'd have positive 8 and negative 8. We have x plus 8 and x minus 8. In number 10, we want two numbers that multiply to negative 12 and add to 4. So we're looking for two numbers with different signs. This time the bigger number is going to be positive though. So two numbers that multiply 12 are 6 and 2. So if I make the 2 negative, that would add to 4. So we would have x plus 6 and x minus 2. In number 11, we want to find two numbers that multiply to negative 3 and add to 2. So those two numbers, the only two numbers that multiply to 3 are 1 and 3. In order to add to a positive 2, we're going to have positive 3 and negative 1. So x plus 3 times x minus 1. In number 12, we want to multiply to negative 20 and add to negative 1. So we want a number that's really close together, 4 and 5. If we're adding to a negative, our bigger number, 5, is going to be negative, and then 4 is positive. So x minus 5 and x plus 4. So we can put the ideas of factoring and zero product property together to complete the whole problem now. So in number 13, we have x squared plus 13x plus 40 equals 0. So we want two numbers that multiply to 40 and add to 13. So we're looking for two positive numbers. We could have 8 and 5. So we have x plus 8 and x plus 5 equals 0. So each parenthesis gets set equal 0. X plus 8 equals 0 and x plus 5 equals 0. We can subtract 8 from both sides in the first equation to get x equals negative 8 as one solution. And then we can subtract 5 on both sides to get x equals negative 5 for our second solution. In number 14, to factor this yet because the equation's not equal to 0. We always need our equation to equal 0. So in order to get to equal 0, we negative 20 to the other side. So we are going to add 20 to both sides. So we have x squared minus 12x plus 20 is equal to 0. So we need two numbers that multiply to 20 and add to negative 12. So we want one number of each sign. We want two negative numbers. So 4 and 5 would only add to negative 9. Two other numbers that multiply 20, though, are 2 and 10. We can use negative 2 and negative 10. So we have x minus 10 and x minus 2 equals 0. Doesn't matter which one comes first. Each parenthesis gets set equal to 0. So x minus 10 equals 0. X minus 2 equals 0. We can add 10 to both sides to get x equals 10. We can add 2 to both sides to get x equals 2. In number 15, x squared minus 16 equals 0. So we want two numbers that multiply to negative 16 and add to 0. So those are numbers that are going to be the same with different signs. So two numbers that multiply to 16 that are the same would be 4 and 4. One of them needs to be negative because we're adding to 0. So we have x plus 4 and x minus 4 equals 0. Each part gets set equal to 0. So in the first part, we can subtract 4 to get x equals negative 4. And the second part, we can add 4 to get x equals positive 4. In 16, again, we're not set equal to 0, so we need to move over the 10x, so we can subtract 10x from both sides. X squared minus 10x plus 25 is equal to 0. So we need two numbers that multiply to 25 and add to negative 10. So we're looking for two numbers that multiply but are going to both be negative. That would be negative 5 and negative 5. We have x minus 5 times x minus 5 equals 0. It's the same number in parentheses, so we only have to solve that once. So we have x minus 5 is equal to 0. We can add 5 to both sides. So x equals 5. Remember, we use ZPP if we are equal to 0. If we're not equal to 0, we just leave it in factored form. Our last part then, find the area of a rectangle with the sides of 8x and 2x minus 3. So remember, to find the area, it's base times height. So we can just multiply 8x plus, or x plus 8 times 2x minus 3. So if we FOIL, x times 2x is 2x squared. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. 8 times 2x is 16x. And 8 times negative 3 is minus 24. We can combine these x's, so we get 2x squared plus 13x minus 24. In 18, we're going the other way. We want to find the dimensions of the rectangle. So here's what's multiplied out. So we got to figure out what are two numbers that multiply to negative 15 and add to negative 2. So we want one of each sign. So we would have negative 5 and positive 3. So it'd be x minus 5 times x plus 3 would be our dimensions. They would each represent a side of the rectangle.